A safe, effective form of reproductive health care or an inhumane, life-ending procedure? This was the debate over a controversial abortion procedure in Gonzales versus Carhart. Although the vast majority of abortions occur in the first trimester, the most common method of abortion in the second trimester was called dilation and evacuation. In Stenberg versus Carhart, the United States Supreme Court held that a Nebraska law outlawing dilation and evacuation was unconstitutional. In response, Congress passed the Partial Birth Abortion Ban Act of 2003. The act prohibited intact dilation and evacuation, a variation of the standard procedure by which the fetus's body was kept mostly intact until the abortion was completed. The procedure was also known as partial birth abortion among pro-life advocates. Leroy Carhart and other doctors who performed second trimester abortions brought a constitutional challenge. The doctors argued that the act was facially invalid for two primary reasons. First, the act was void for vagueness, and second, the act imposed an undue burden on the right to an abortion due to its overbreadth and lack of an exception to protect the woman's health. The federal district court agreed and held the act unconstitutional. The Court of Appeals affirmed. The United States Supreme Court granted cert. The question was whether a law banning intact dilation and evacuation without an exception for the health of the mother unconstitutionally burdened constitutional abortion rights. In an opinion authored by Justice Kennedy, the court held that the act was constitutional. It wasn't unconstitutionally vague and didn't constitute an undue burden on a woman's right to an abortion. On the vagueness argument, the court reasoned that the statute described the prohibited procedure with adequate specificity. In defining partial birth abortion, the act provided anatomical landmarks for partial delivery. These guidelines were sufficiently clear to inform physicians of what was and wasn't legal under the act. Next, the court held that the act didn't impose an undue burden on the right to an abortion. The court noted that under Planned Parenthood versus Casey, the state has a legitimate interest in protecting fetal life. Under Casey, this interest must be balanced against the constitutional right to an abortion, so that a law regulating abortion is unconstitutional only if its purpose or effect creates a substantial obstacle to seeking an abortion. Kennedy reasoned that because the act only prohibited intact dilation and evacuation and not other second trimester abortion procedures, the act didn't impose a substantial obstacle. Further, the act's purposes were legitimate under Casey: to express respect for the dignity of human life, to safeguard the integrity and reputation of the medical profession, and to protect women who may regret their decisions to have late-term abortions. Finally, the court addressed the act's lack of an exception where necessary for the mother's health. In the court's view, a health exception would be constitutionally necessary only if medical evidence demonstrated that intact dilation and evacuation was the safer choice for some women compared to other forms of abortion. The court found that the evidence on that question was inconclusive. Because of that medical uncertainty, the court deferred to Congress's judgment that no health exception was necessary. The court reversed the Court of Appeals and upheld the act as constitutional. Justice Thomas concurred, joined by Justice Scalia. He agreed with the court's application of the court's abortion jurisprudence, but wrote separately to emphasize his belief that there is no constitutional right to abortion. Justice Ginsburg, joined by 4 justices, dissented. According to Justice Ginsburg, the majority opinion misapplied the court's abortion precedents, particularly Casey. Contrary to the majority's determination that the evidence was inconclusive, she pointed to ample, reputable medical evidence supporting the conclusion that intact dilation and evacuation was actually much safer for many women. Justice Ginsburg was also critical of Justice Kennedy's theory that the state should protect women who regret their decision to have abortions. In Justice Ginsburg's view, this theory was unsupported by evidence and reflected antiquated notions about women's role in society. Gonzales versus Carhart represented the first time since Roe versus Wade that the court upheld the constitutionality of an abortion restriction with no exception for the mother's health.